Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant, where I talk about what happened in the tennis world in the previous week. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about Carlos Alcaraz beating Novak Djokovic and winning his first Wimbledon title. And I come to the beach to get inspired, just like my favorite player, Rafael Nadal. He draws inspiration from the sea. I do too. And I have a lot to share in today's rant. I want to start off with something that irked me yesterday. So I watched the entire match, and out of curiosity, I flipped over to the Tennis Channel because the Wimbledon match here in the United States was covered by ESPN. And to my shock, what did the Tennis Channel show during one of the greatest matches ever? They showed pickleball. You got two serves or one?
No, one.
What? I tuned into the Tennis Channel to maybe catch a post-match analysis by possibly Andy Roddick, who I really enjoy listening to. But to my shock, there it was, the PPA, the Professional Pickleball Association. It makes zero sense to show pickleball on the Tennis Channel ever. If you showed it in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., I would say, okay, fine. But to cover pickleball during the Wimbledon final makes even less sense. So I don't think that the Tennis Channel realizes that there's a large amount of tennis players who absolutely despise pickleball. There's been 3 New York Times articles that I've read on the war between tennis and pickleball. And look, I'm a huge Tennis Channel fan. I not only pay for it with a subscription, but I also have Tennis Channel Plus, and I do think it's a great product. I enjoy it very much. And it would be nice if pickleball could be shown on the Pickleball channel. So let's talk about yesterday's final. And for all you guys who watched my Monday morning rant after Djokovic won the French Open, I want to thank you for all the engagement. There's been over 600 comments, 50,000 views on that video, and I really appreciate what you guys wrote. And I want to tell you a few more things about Djokovic, things that I've been observing for a long time, things that were evident in yesterday's match, and I didn't mention these things when I talked about Djokovic winning the French Open. One thing that always amazed me about Djokovic when I watched him lose these tough battles in really important stages of big tournaments against Nadal, for example, or even against Federer, is how gracious of a loser he is and how big of a sportsman he is. He never says anything bad about an opponent. There's always a warm embrace at the net, and people don't give Djokovic enough credit because of his sportsmanship. I'm not sure if Djokovic received the Fair Play award from the ATP, but he definitely deserves one. Another thing that amazes me about Djokovic is how he performs when the crowd is against him. So obviously the 2 favorite players of all times are Federer and Nadal, and he had to fight against crowds who were against him through his entire career. And you would think now that Nadal is injured and Federer is retired, that the crowd would be for Djokovic. No, the crowd continues to be against him in these big matches, and they were definitely against him in yesterday's match against Alcaraz as well. Not only does this not bother Djokovic, but he draws inspiration and motivation from the crowd being against him. And I cannot tell you how impressive of a mental skill that is. Just think of basketball when teams go on the road, how tough it is to win. And that's a team sport. Now imagine in tennis, you're out there by yourself and the entire crowd is cheering your opponent's name. Many players would crumble under that. Djokovic doesn't, and it's something that I've never seen in professional tennis. Now another thing about Djokovic is the fact that he's 36 years old, but he's playing like 26, and he himself said 36 is the new 26. And if you take a look at his results this year, he's won 2 slams. He was on his way to win the Grand Slam this year, and he was so close to winning the match yesterday, despite the fact that he was not at his best. I watched Djokovic enough to know what his top level is, and yesterday was absolutely not Djokovic's top level. And despite that fact, he still almost managed to win. So he came out in the first set. Alcaraz was possibly a little bit nervous, and he won the set 6-1. Then Alcaraz started playing a lot better, broke him. Then Djokovic did this classic instant re-break. And then the match was pretty even until the tiebreak. And Djokovic was up late in the tiebreak and then uncharacteristically missed 2 easy backhands in a row, something that you never see from Djokovic. Now, another thing that happened that's very uncharacteristic is that after he lost the second set tiebreak, he went on to lose the third set 6-1, which is not something that happens very often with Djokovic. Normally, when he loses a tough set, he's right back at it in the following set, and most of the time comes out as the winner. In the fifth set, Djokovic fought hard, but Alcaraz just simply outplayed him. And you can see the frustration in Djokovic's mannerisms. At one point in the fifth set, he even broke his racket on the net post. And I want to just tell you quickly that 3 years ago, I made a video titled How to Break a Tennis Racket, the biomechanics of breaking a tennis racket. My dad was still alive back then, and I wasn't sure about posting this video because I by no means want to encourage anyone to throw their rackets. I always praise Rafael Nadal as someone who never throws his racket, as something that you should aspire to copy. So for that reason, I was unsure about posting this video, but my dad convinced me to not post it. However, in this video, I'll provide advice on how to throw a racket where, number one, the racket won't break. Number two, you will not injure yourself. And number three, you will not injure your opponent. So it was a valuable video in a way. And one of the things that I talked about in this video was that you should never break your racket like Djokovic broke it in the fifth set of the Wimbledon final. See, what happens when you break your racket by hitting it on the ground, your wrist is in a more neutral position and it's somewhat safe. There's still a risk of injury. However, when you break your racket sideways like this against the net post, the wrist is more unstable in this area, it's weaker, and there's a high risk of injury. And I noticed that Djokovic was actually shaking out his wrist after he broke it that way, and the first return that he hit after that racket break was a complete shank, and then he continued to shake out his wrist. So, under no circumstance should you ever throw your racket, but sometimes in the heat of the battle, if you happen to throw it, do not ever break your racket like Djokovic broke it in that fifth set, and that is breaking it sideways across the net post. And now let's talk about Carlos Alcaraz, and I don't want to bore you with things that you've heard. Newspapers are filled with stories about Alcaraz, so you already know how good of a player he is. Even Djokovic himself said that he is the complete package. He has something of each of the big three. It's hard to imagine that somebody can play tennis better than Alcaraz does. Now, one thing that stands out to me about Alcaraz that differentiates him from the big three, or really anybody else, is his body language. The great coach, Riccardo Piatti, he described professional tennis as suffering. And not only physical suffering, but also mental suffering. And you can see it on a player like Nadal and Djokovic, how much they suffer during the match. You couldn't really see it on Federer because he was more of a stoic, calm personality that didn't let you in on his emotions. But when I watch Alcaraz, I don't see any suffering at all. What I see when I watch him play tennis is pure joy. He is interacting with the crowd, he often has a smile on his face, and it simply looks like he's having fun out there. A while back I made a video where I talked about the thing that Alcaraz was doing a lot, which is pump his fist and stare into the box after almost every point. And I can tell you that as I'm watching him now, I'm seeing this less and less. Now, the fist pump is not always towards the player box. Now the fist pumps are more either towards himself or towards the crowd. He is engaging the crowd a lot better than he did before. And that to me shows a sign of maturity. He is maturing as a player. He is not so dependent on his coaching staff. I don't think it's positive when players are constantly seeking the attention from the player's box, because after all, they can't help you that much. You're out there by yourself. It's okay to have some interaction. Even Djokovic does it. I'm not saying you should never look up there. It's good to look up there, but literally after every point early on in Alcaraz's career, he was fist pumping towards the player box. And he's doing that a lot less now. Now here's a super important thing that a lot of people don't understand, and these are the expectations. So yesterday I was reading how Alcaraz is going to break all the records. He's going to win 30 Grand Slams. He's going to win 50 Grand Slams. And while I think it's plausible that he will break records, I do think that he has all the capabilities that are needed to become one of the greatest players of all time. You have to put in context of how difficult these records are going to be to break. Guys, is just the beginning. Alcaraz has 2 Grand Slams, he has 12 titles, and he has 4 Masters titles. So sometimes the problem with expectations is that it creates a lot of additional pressure. And also, what people are now doing, which is very normal for the media, is they're already writing Djokovic off as if he's completely done. Listen, Djokovic is going to continue to break records. He's very capable of continuing to win Grand Slam tournaments, continuing to win Masters titles. And also Nadal is training again, and he might be coming back later this year, and he's very capable of winning big tournaments again, because nobody likes that lefty topspin forehand. I don't care what age Nadal is. So let's take it easy with these grand proclamations that Alcaraz is the new GOAT. He's just in the beginning, guys. And just like John McEnroe said yesterday, which, by the way, ESPN in the Wimbledon final, the commentary was superb with Chris Fowler, John McEnroe, and Patrick McEnroe. I did a community post a few days ago where I asked what your favorite commentator is. And to me, covering big matches like this, John McEnroe is the absolute commentary GOAT. Maybe if McEnroe is commentating in the early rounds of a Grand Slam, he sometimes isn't too familiar with some of the players, but when it comes to these big matches, John McEnroe is GOAT, and I feel the combination of John McEnroe and Patrick McEnroe and Chris Fowler is exceptional. And John McEnroe said yesterday that he sees Carlos Alcaraz winning double-digit majors, but let's be careful with these proclamations of him breaking Djokovic's record. It's way too early for that. We don't know what's going to happen. Can he do it? I think he can, but we also don't know what's going to happen as far as his injuries are concerned. We also don't know how he's going to be matching up with certain players. I know he has a hard time sometimes playing against Sinner. Holger Rune is getting better. Also, 5 years from now, there might be a new player that we all haven't heard of who is going to start playing incredibly well. So we just have to be patient and be thankful that we have Carlos Alcaraz, because I'm going to tell you a quick story. About 4 years ago, I was very worried about pickleball, and I was very worried about the fact that the big 3 are going to retire soon. And that's why I started this rant off talking about pickleball, because I didn't foresee a good future for tennis. I thought that we're going to get a situation where there's going to be a lot of different slam champions. There's going to be a lack of consistency, something that the WTA Tour gets often criticized for. But now, almost miraculously, we have another player out of Spain. And Spain as a tennis nation deserves a lot of credit that they had Nadal, or have Nadal, he's not done yet, and now they have Alcaraz, possibly 2 of the greatest players ever back to back. And speaking of strong tennis nations, shout out goes to the Czech Republic. That's one of the greatest tennis nations in the history of tennis. The amount of Grand Slam champions they have produced for such a small nation is super impressive, with now Marketa Vondrousova at winning Wimbledon. But guys, the reason why I'm so happy about Alcaraz is that the future of tennis is in good hands. Now, people used to say that when it really wasn't in good hands. When you would see pickleball blowing up and the big 3 retiring, it's something that would scare me a lot. But now I see that we have a player who is simply spectacular, and it's going to be a joy watching him play in the coming years.